Record. Okay. So if you would go ahead and put your name in the chat for those who are here. And again, I'm gonna record the lecture for everyone to be able to view it later. But for those of you who are here, just go ahead and put your name in the chat, and then we'll get moving. Type your name in the chat for me. Thank you. All right, share my screen and we'll get rolling. Okay. All right. Do it this way. All right. Can everybody see my screen for those online?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay. Say it again. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay. Good. All right. So this will be the last of this chapter. So we're going to talk about intelligence. We're going to talk about measuring intelligence. We'll also talk about the different types of intelligence. So intelligence is something that is very abstract. Okay. Very abstract. So when people hear the word intelligence, oftentimes they think, oh, that person's really smart, right? They try to equate intelligence to making good grades, or intelligence to being able to solve a problem pretty quickly, right? But intelligence, again, is something that is very abstract, and different people have different definitions for what intelligence is. And so we'll talk about intelligence in a lot of different ways. And as we talked about psychology at the beginning, there's so many different theories that explain different types of intelligences. And we'll talk about those types. We'll talk about how we measure it. And then we'll also talk about the importance of not taking so much into account, right? When you have and you're measuring something, every measure is going to be different in how you measure it, right? So when you get on a scale in the gym, and maybe it's one of those digital scales, the digital scale that measures your weight may be different than the scale that has the weights, the analog, and you move the weight to the right, and you move the smaller weight to get the smaller pounds, right? So again, those are different ways to measure, and so it'll be different in how you get a score. And so we can't put all of our eggs in one of those baskets. We have to take both of them into account when we're, again, especially when we're measuring intelligence. Okay. So for intelligence, move this out. Okay, so for intelligence, when we're measuring intelligence, this is kind of a history, right? So at the beginning, when they were measuring intelligence, they were trying to determine kind of what children were kind of behind developmentally, right? So they were looking at, a child, they were giving these tests, and they were looking at their developmental intelligence, okay? So they would give the children a test. They would give them, so they had a test for what they should be doing, and then they would give them a test to see if they are matching age-wise where they're supposed to be, right? And so they were looking, especially for those who are in, special education. This is what happens. They take the children, they assess them on their IQ, and those who have a score less than a certain IQ score, they are placed in, oftentimes, maybe it's in a all-inclusive classroom, right, where you really don't know who these individuals are there in the classroom. They go to class, they just need extra help. Or you have individuals who are in what we call a self-contained classroom, and they put all these children in the same classroom because their IQs are a little lower, and they wouldn't be able to follow the coursework that what we call a normal student would be able to follow, right? So Alfred Binet and Theodore Simmons, they created a scale which again expressed IQ as what we call a mental age, right? So if a child was 6 years old and they were had cognitive skills that were at age, then they would be what we consider a normal cognitive functioning, right? But if we had a 6-year-old and their cognitive age was actually somewhere around 3, right, then we'd say that that person was kind of developmentally delayed and they would need extra help in order to get to the level they need to be at for that mental age, right? So that was the first thing was looking at mental age. So if I had an individual who was 10 years old and they had a mental age of 6, then I knew that there was some kind of developmental delay and they needed extra help to kind of catch them up, okay? Stanford Binet is a kind of an advancement or an update of the scale that Alfred Binet and Theodore Simmons did, right? And so what this did is it took your mental age and it took your chronological age and it multiplied it by 100, and that gave you what we call your IQ score, right? So if your IQ score for this particular scale was anything less than 100, then you knew that you had a developmental delay, right? So again, if you look at the formula at the bottom, it says IQ equals MA over CA times 100, right? So if child 1, his mental age was 6, his chronological age was 6, you multiply that by 100 and you get 100, right? That means he's on par to being, I mean, he's average student, right? His mental age and his chronological age match, so he's functioning or developmentally pretty easily, right? Then you took a look at child 2. Child 2 has a mental age of 6 and he has a chronological age of 9, okay? So with this young person, they are developmentally delayed because, again, their chronological age is higher than their mental age, okay? And so with that being said, they would maybe need some additional help. They need some additional help. Look at child 4. Child 4 has a mental age of 12 and their actual age or chronological age is 9, okay? So their IQ is a 133. That means they're pretty intelligent, right? Or we consider pretty intelligent for a child. And so they don't need additional help. They may be, doing really well in class. And so they are actually above their developmental level, okay? The last thing we'll talk about is intelligent testing for adults, right? So the Wechsler's Adult Intelligence Scale is what we call a normal distributed scale, and it is something that helps adults check their IQ, right? And so that's what we use for adults, and we still use these scales today. But again, with these measuring tools, again, you have to take everything with a grain of salt because, again, different measures measure a different way, and it's very, very difficult to determine, okay, intelligence is really abstract. So saying that someone is highly intelligent doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get all A's in school, right? They may have other issues that may force them or hinder them from being really successful in school. So again, intelligence is just based on a particular test that they take, okay? Okay, so what does the modern IQ score mean, okay? What does the modern IQ score mean? It obviously, when you're talking about IQ, you have to have a way to compare your IQ score to IQ scores across the country, across the world, right? So when we talk about Albert Einstein had an IQ around 160, right? He had an IQ of around 160. If you look at this graph and look at the IQ score, the average IQ score for a person is 100, okay? So look at, again, Albert Einstein, who has an IQ score of 160. That means that his IQ score was off the charts. That means he was pretty much a complete genius, right? But that doesn't mean he was, making the best grades. It just means he, again, had pretty high cognitive capacity, right? And was able to do really well in some subjects and wasn't able to do so well in others, right? But again, Albert Einstein, when we talk about a genius, Again, he was, one in those outliers. He was in one of those rare. As you can see in IQ score, the orange column, right? Those are kind of the most common IQ scores that you're going to get, around 85 to 115. And that would be considered really, really close to average, okay? Anything outside of that, so those green columns, again, that's when you're starting to get either on the left-hand side, that means a really, really low IQ. Those are for individuals who will be considered developmental delayed. And those who are in the green on the right-hand side, those are individuals who are kind of, academically gifted, right? Those individuals who are really, really smart, above average in intelligence. When you start getting into the yellow and into the purple, on the left-hand side, anybody with a IQ score that is less than 70, those individuals they're really, really low functioning individuals. And so they would probably need a lot of extra help. Right? That would be considered intellectual disability, right? So those individuals would be the ones who, when you see individuals in what we call a self-contained classroom, those are individuals who have IQs of 70 or below, right? So they need special help. They don't do all the coursework that a normal student would do. They're not in a general ed classroom. So those individuals need extra help, okay? But on the right-hand side, individuals who are in the yellow and then again in the purple on the right-hand side, they are really gifted. And oftentimes you're going to see those individuals scoring really, really high on standardized tests and doing really well in the classroom, okay? So again, you're able to compare your IQ score to everyone else's IQ score, okay? When we talk about percentile score, if you are in what we call the 98th percentile, that means that 98% of the people who score in that IQ are at your IQ or below your score, okay, that you obtain, right? So for anybody that scores 100, that means 50% of the people who have IQ scores score at 100 or below 100, okay? So again, IQ score and why they normally distributed is, again, so you can compare yourself to everyone else in the population, okay? Okay. But again, like I talked about, when you're looking at that distribution, we go back, right? You're able to compare yourself. And that's one of the major reasons why we use what we call a normal distribution. For those of you that have to take statistics, many of you may, we will cover that in stats, okay? I teach statistics too. So when you're taking stats, we will talk about the normal distribution. We'll also talk about IQ scores and how we use IQ scores to measure intelligence, okay? But again, the biggest point to take away from this is, again, when you have IQ scores, you want to normalize them so that you can compare yourself to people in the population, right? That's why when people are tested, we're able to see them on that normal distribution. And if somebody has a 70, we know that they are below average. If someone has a 120, we know that they are above average, okay, based on just that normal distribution. And again, when we're looking at students, we're able to compare students based on their IQ scores because it is on a normal distribution. It's on a standard scale, okay? Okay. So with intelligence, there are two concepts that we have to talk about, okay? One of those concepts is called what we call reliability. How reliable is a measurement tool, okay? So I like to talk about scales a lot because, again, that's one of the easiest examples that I can explain. A reliable scale is going to be a consistent scale. So when you get on this scale, on this weight scale, you should consistently get the weight that you actually are, right? So right now, I think I'm about 185 pounds. So if I get on the scale and I get on the scale one time, I should always be 185 pounds. If I get on the scale and that scale is one time I get on the scale and it's 185, the next time I get on and it's 193, the next time I get on is 172, then I know that that scale is not a reliable measure, right? So with reliability and IQ, I want my measurement tool, whatever I'm using to measure IQ, to be reliable. And many of the IQ tests that people take are exceptionally reliable, right? So if you take an IQ test one day and then you wait 2 or 3 months and you take the IQ test again, you will usually get the same IQ score, or at least around the same IQ score. So it is extremely reliable. When we talk about validity, though, validity is, am I measuring the actual construct that I'm supposed to be measuring, right? Sometimes when we measure IQ, sometimes the tests aren't actually measuring IQ, right? Maybe they're measuring something else. So if it's a valid measure, then I know that I'm absolutely measuring IQ, right? But if I'm not, I might be measuring something else, okay? But again, IQ tests are not a valid measure for anything other than measuring IQ. I can't take an IQ test and think, okay, this person who has a high IQ is going to do extremely well in school, because IQ is not measuring your ability level in math. It's not measuring your ability level in science or English or your ability to study well, right? It's just measuring your ability on that particular scale, on that particular test, okay? What IQ does do, however, you're able to use IQ because IQ is related to other subject matters that we study, right? So it is related to science. It is oftentimes related to math and English, your verbal skills, right? So again, you are sometimes able to use IQ to predict academic work or your performance in school, okay? But again, if IQ is just the purpose of to test an IQ intelligence, again, the validity sometimes is questionable because it doesn't measure certain subjects one-to-one, okay? But again, so if I'm measuring weight, the scale needs to be measuring what it needs to be measuring, right? So if it's body weight, hopefully the measure, the scale that I'm using is measuring body weight and not height or some other measure, okay? So again, reliability is the consistency of the test, and validity is, again, how well the test is measuring what it is designed to measure. Okay. So studies have been done. Let me move this down. So studies have been done, right? And we look at IQ, and studies do show that the higher the IQ, many times, it leads to higher vocational success, right? So while it may not always predict vocational success, on average, someone who has a higher intelligence or a higher IQ usually will have higher vocational success. Now, that doesn't take into account that the person may have great social skills or may be a good leader. Sometimes individuals who have high intelligence are, don't have great social skills, aren't, really good people, right? So they won't always be successful. But for 9 times out of 10, you're going to get individuals who score high. They're going to do really well in school. They will eventually do really well, on standardized tests, and then eventually they'll get good jobs, right? So again, IQ does measure and sometimes academic ability fairly well. So again, when you have good school performance, so if you have a high GPA in college, usually you end up with the better jobs. Okay, usually you end up with the better jobs. That doesn't happen all the times, but again, on average, if you have high IQ, you score really well on standardized tests, you get into better schools, you have a higher GPA in college, and then when you're going out for jobs after college, you get the jobs that you want, okay? Any questions about that, okay? But again, intelligence may not always predict, but again, it is a pretty good predictor in success outcomes in life. Okay. So now we're going to talk about heredity and environment, because again, in psychology, one of the biggest debates is, does our natural selves, does our nature affect our intelligence or any other trait, or does the environment influence our intelligence, right? And what we figured out and been able to determine is that both of them play a role. We don't know the proportion, like how much heredity and how much environment play, but we do know that both of them play a role, especially in certain traits, right? We can determine that intelligence, right? If you grow up in a certain environment, your intelligence can be influenced by that, and sometimes your heredity. So your genes, your genetic expression could also influence your intelligence. So if your parents, are really intelligent people, and they score pretty high, have pretty high IQs, oftentimes that is passed down to the child, right, or to the siblings. And so we'll talk about those types of things. Okay. So with many of the other studies that we'll talk about, any other chapters we'll talk about, we're going to talk about heredity, the hereditary influence on intelligence and other factors, right? So when we talk about heredity, you have to use twins. Oftentimes, twins are the best individuals to study when we're talking about, especially intelligence. When we use twins, we're looking at how twins and their genetic makeup, especially identical twins, their genetic makeup is absolute same, right? So with genetics, we're talking about the absolute same twins, right? And then fraternal twins, they have 50% of their genetic makeup is the same, right? But with identical twins, we want to see, right, if genetics plays a role in intelligence. So with twins, we're looking at what we call heritability estimates, okay? And what heritability means, we're looking at how much genes and how much gene expressions are accounting for the variability, right, in intelligence, right? So if the twins, I like to use this example. Say we have four boys, right? These 4 boys, they grow up in the same environment, right? We have 4 boxes. We put them in a box. They live in this box for their entire lives. And they get the same amount of food. They get the same amount of attention. They get the same amount of everything, right? When they are released from that box, right? When they are released from that box, again, they have the same environment, the exact same environment. When they are released from that box and they're able to be tested on IQ, we expect that even though they grew up in the same environment, we expect that those 4 boys are going to have varying levels of intelligence, right? No matter what, right? Because heritability is really, really high. And when we talk about heritability, that means that heredity or hereditary influences are playing a bigger role in intelligence than environment is. Because again, the environment is the same, okay? And then on the other hand, think of 4 identical quadruplets, right? They are identical. That means that their genes are the exact same. So think about them they grow up in different environments. One grows up in California, one grows up in New York City, the other one grows up in Alabama, and then we have another one that grew up in Alaska, right? So we got four identical quadruplets, and they grow up in 4 different environments, right? And then we test them. We test them on intelligence, okay? While heritability is not a factor anymore because environment plays a bigger role. They grew up in totally different environments. So their IQs are very different now because they grew up in different environments, right? So heritability means that the proportion and the variability in a particular trait, and in this case, we're talking about intelligence, is higher when you grow up in an environment that is basically the same and the persons are different because of just the genetic influence, okay? Just the genetic influence is playing a role, okay? So again, that's what heritability means. And I'll post a video on Blackboard just to explain in a little more detail, and then to give you those better examples, okay? So again, when we look at genetic similarity, right? The greater the genetic similarity associated with greater similarity IQ, right? So with identical twins, when identical twins are raised together in the same household, their IQs are oftentimes pretty similar in level of IQ, right? When identical twins are reared apart, even though they are reared in different settings, oftentimes they still usually have pretty high IQs, right? As you reduce the genetic similarity, right? So we talk about fraternal twins. Fraternal twins have 50% of the genetic material that are the same, right? And so you see a reduction in the relationship, okay? You see a reduction in the correlation, right? So the IQs begin to become less and less the same, okay? So again, with fewer and fewer genetic similarities, you begin to see a reduction in the similarity in IQ. But again, when you look at 100% identical twins, reared in the same environment, they had the same environment, they had the same genetic makeup, they usually have pretty similar IQs, okay? And so now we're seeing that heredity plays a big role in IQ, just based on the identical twins and the identical twins even when they're reared apart in different households, okay? So again, heredity plays a big role, while environment does also play some other role in intelligence. Okay. Another thing that has been studied is adoption studies, right? So what happens is we're looking at environment more so than heredity. So say that identical twins are separated at birth, right? You have two identical twins separated at birth, and one is adopted by one family, and then we have another twin adopted by the other family, right? We start to see that those individuals who are adopted start to resemble their IQ of their foster parents and not their biological parents, right? And so that means that environment is playing a bigger role in IQ than just the genetics, right? So again, that's why adoption studies are also really important, because they show similarities with how the environment is playing a role in intelligence and not so much just the genetics, okay? One other thing that plays a big role is how stimulating your environment is, right? Like we talked about last class, if you grow up in an environment that is not as stimulating, right? Maybe your parents don't talk to you as much. Maybe they don't share, their experiences with you in the household, right? And maybe you're just looking at TV and you're not engaging in any academic enrichment, none of those things. You will start to see a decline in IQ scores for individuals who grow up in, really impoverished situations, right? Luckily my mom created an environment where I had to kind of engage with, reading, math, but in some households, my mom worked 2 jobs, she was not always there, right? So I could have done anything I wanted to do, but she added kind of an enrichment portion to when I was at home by myself, right? But some students, when they're at home, they're not doing much, and that leads to oftentimes a decline in IQ scores and a decline in academic performance. Okay? So again, when you have a really enriched environment, oftentimes the IQ scores improve. When it is a kind of a deprivation in the environment, IQ scores oftentimes decline. Okay. So again, when you have your own children, you want to make sure that you provide them with a really enriched environment, right? They are reading, you're making sure they're doing math, you're make sure that they're just in a really mentally stimulating environment that will really, really improve their chances of doing really well in school and have better outcomes as they grow older. Okay. The other thing that has influenced IQ is kind of just those generational changes. As we grow and as from generation to generation, IQ scores continue to rise over and over again, right? Why do you think IQ performance is improving, right? One of the reasons is technology is continuing, right? We are exposed to so much more, right, than our ancestors. We have access to anything that we want at our fingertips, right? We can Google anything and get the knowledge of anything that we want, right? If we want to know about physics, we can type in physics into YouTube and there will be lectures and lectures of physics lectures, right? So again, the Flynn effect means that there are so many environmental factors that are influencing IQ. And again, the performance and the rise of IQ from generation to generation is associated with just the technology that we have at our fingertips, right? So again, as we continue to get older and older, each generation is continue to get smarter and smarter. And it might not be smarter, but they just have more information. They have more information at their fingertips. So you all are a lot more socially conscious than I was, right? So when it comes to politics and being a lot more socially conscious, you all are a lot more open because you all have more at your fingertips, right? Social media, you see that more and more now than you did when I was growing up. Okay, but again, those generational changes are purely mostly contributed to just the technology, how we advance as a society. Okay. All right. So one of the last things we're going to talk about, when we talk about heredity and environment, there is a average that one single person and a limit to intelligence, and environmental factors help determine where individuals fall in those limits. Okay. So if a person comes out of the womb, they are automatically kind of geared to be a certain intelligence, right? And the environmental factors play a role in whether they're going to reach their upper limit of intelligence or go more towards their lower limit, right? So when we talk about someone being reared in an environment that is very enriching, very stimulating, they will likely reach their upper limit of their IQ, right? But if someone is in an environment where they are in a less enriching, a really deprived environment, they probably will go hit lower to their lower limit of their IQ. Right? So again, it's really, really important that we give children an opportunity to be reared in those really, really enriching environments that promote development and intelligence, and then they should be scoring really, really high on their IQ, right? So that's really what we want, right? Children who are reared in a really, really stimulating, enriching environment usually reach their potential as far as IQ. So I would hope that, in your environments and the environments that you create for maybe your younger siblings and even your children are really, really enriching so that they can reach their full potential with IQ, okay? But I'm gonna stop there. There's a little bit more, but I'll stop here. And again, this is recorded, so if anybody that did not tell your classmates, I'll send them an email message and announcement. But again, have a good weekend. I'll post this recording, and I will see you all on Monday. I'll let y'all sign in. You didn't get the memo either? What don't understand? Oh, you say, oh, okay. They sent an email. Well, I got an email at like 8:42. So you live 30 minutes away? Where you stay? Oh, okay. 3. Y'all can sign this. I think cancel the gym. They can close the gym on me, man.
No, I was thinking about that too. I think they I think they don't.
Once they cancel class, they just it's crazy. I want to go to the gym there too. See, I just say. Yeah, I took attendance. Make sure you put your name in the chat. For those who are still here, make sure you put your name in the chat, and I'll get your attendance.